Welcome to Train Signal. I'm Mel Haynes, and you're watching SQL Server 2008. In this video, we'll be looking at replication. So what exactly do we want to look at? The first thing, what's the problem to solve? You know, as an IT person, it's real easy to get very excited about the latest and greatest technology and toys, but we have to also keep in mind what's the business need, what's the business problem that we're trying to solve. So I want to spend a little time talking about that first, and then we'll get into what is SQL replication. We'll talk about all the latest cool buzzwords and terms with SQL replication so you can impress your friends, and we'll get into, of course, setting it up and making it all fly. So starting with what's the problem? Well, in the beginning, going back to Veronica's, we've got this wonderful business that she started that's blooming like you wouldn't believe, and we've got a problem that most businesses would love to have. We're getting a lot bigger. So initially we say bump up the server. We need a little more space to accommodate the massive numbers of orders, customers, managing employees, managing suppliers, etc. But as business continues to bloom, pun intended, we find ourselves needing to open other offices, say in Boise, so we can handle some of the clients out west a little more directly, or over in Naples, Florida, or Phoenix maybe, and then even breaking off the coast and getting out to Puerto Rico and San Juan. So now we've got these remote offices and everybody's still needing the same data from our host office back in Chicago. So we've got a lot of traffic over our network, a lot of stuff back and forth. And then if the main server or communication links go down, we've got a problem. Everybody's down. And then there's also the issue of we've grown again. So performance just has to take a hit because of the number of people hitting all this data. And what's interesting is they really don't need access to all the data. The people in Phoenix aren't that concerned about the clients in San Juan. So really, segregated data would have some far-reaching benefits. You don't have to have everything available to everybody. So let's see if we can change this a little bit. What is replication, SQL replication? Well, we've got Veronica's based in Chicago, and we want to take that information, or at least part of that information, and move it. We want to break it up and distribute it to the different offices around the country, and even in our case, outside of the country, if we've got an office now in Puerto Rico. So let's say we want to take and break it up into at least 4 parts. We keep the Chicago office, but also we open up an office in Naples and call that the Eastern office, and San Juan and Naples can both pull from that server. We can have a North Central office, and Boise and any other clients in that general area can pull from that server. And then we can have a Western office and a Western server, by the way. Each one of those is a separate server. And our Phoenix office and anybody in that general area can pull from that server. So I've moved from a single server or maybe even a cluster of servers in Chicago to distributed servers around the country, a minimum of 4 so far. Replication gives me a way to take the information from Chicago and distribute it or replicate it to the various offices around the country at predefined intervals, keeping that information up to date and in sync. Cool stuff. Very cool stuff. So once again, what is replication? It's about distributing your data and database objects. And that's the key thing to remember. We're not just sending the information that's in the tables. The table structure, all the indices, the stored procedures, the views, anything you've created and defined within your database can be replicated out to your various offices. Data redundancy. We want to have multiple copies of our information available to our users if possible. A beautiful thing about this, you could possibly reroute clients from any office to any server if need be in the event of an outage by having data redundancy always available throughout your network. And then, of course, faster access for lots of reasons. One, the simple fact that you've got fewer people hitting each server. You've distributed the workload. So you got a lot of benefits from SQL Server replication. And some key concepts for replication. You can divide SQL Server replication up into 2 main categories. First of all, there's server to server, which is what I'm going to focus on for most of this video. I have a central site here with a central server, and I have various remote servers that each get copies of the information. Now notice in this diagram I have two-way arrows, and that's valid. You can have replication in effect in both directions. So I can have the people in Naples or in San Juan making changes to the data that gets propagated back up to my central office. We'll talk about that. Now in this video we're going to actually implement transactional replication. So it'll be one way for now, going from the central site out to the remote sites. The other main division would be server to client. Say in the example of mobile users or POS, point of sale systems, where I'm sending information directly out to some client system. That's another general flavor of SQL Server replication that you have available to you. So now the big question is, what gets sent, where, and when does it happen? So let's start with the what. Looking at types of replication, there are basically three. The first one, transactional replication. This is typically used in the server-to-server case. You're offloading your batch processing sometimes, so you don't have to have your production server being weighed down by various batch operations or reporting. It's an incremental type of replication where you're sending, as the title says, transactions incrementally. Now, how big is the block of data being sent on each burst? How often do you send information? All of that is configurable based on your hardware needs, your hardware available to you, your user requirements. All of that can be adjusted to fit your environment. And then the last thing on the list, transactional, is typically one way. You're sending information from some central server out to your remote servers. Second on the list is your merge replication, oftentimes used for distributed applications where you've got changes happening on both ends. Mobile applications are a great example of when you'll typically see merge replication implemented. As I said before, your POS or point of sale systems are another great example of merge replication. I worked for a fast food dynasty for a period of time and helped implement their POS system, which was exactly this type of a thing, where we had to take information that was generated at the cash registers, all the records of sales, and merge that back up to a central server, and the central server took care of propagating out things such as price changes, tracking employee hours, so lots of information going both directions. And last but not least, merge replication is two-way, which makes it a little more involved, a little more complicated, especially when it comes to backups. So you want to think about that when you're implementing merge replication. And then the third type of replication is snapshot. So I got the picture of the little camera there because it's sort of like a picture. You take a picture of the data and you send it out. Now, snapshot replication is actually included whenever you're implementing the other two, transactional or merge, because you start with an initial snapshot of your data. That's how you get a complete set of the information you need to work with at the location where you're going to push the information to. So it provides your initial data. Anytime you do a snapshot, it's a complete refresh of your data. So if you're using snapshots on a regular ongoing basis, you typically want to limit yourself to smaller data sets, simply because the volume of data you're sending every single time could be very large if you're not sticking with reasonable data set sizes. Looking at the SQL Server roles when it comes to replication, your SQL Server box will perform three main roles. Now these could all be on the same computer, or they could be distributed across three different computers, or they could be two on one computer. We'll talk about that. But the three main roles are publisher, the one who's actually creating the data, the main owner of the data that's sending this information out, the distributor that manages passing it out, sort of like the dealer dealing out the cards, right? And then the subscriber, the person who's receiving this information. Starting with the publisher, that's the source of your data. It creates the publication that is then distributed by a distributor. The distributor is going to store your replicated data and then be responsible for distributing that publication out to the various subscribers. So I have a publisher creating a publication, which is then housed by a distributor and pushed out to my various subscribers. Now, in this diagram, I'm showing my publisher and my distributor as two separate boxes, two separate computers. That's what those cylinders represent, right? Those are computers, right? Now, does it have to be that way? No, it doesn't. Is it a recommended practice? In most cases, yes, it is. Now, in our particular demo, I'm going to combine my publisher and my distributor for now, but you do want to weigh carefully if you do something like that, because you are losing the advantage of distributing a lot of the processing across multiple computers. And then last on the list, there's subscribers. It's a database instance that receives the replicated data. The people who actually read the news, that's your subscriber. So you have your publication coming in, housed on your distributor, which then sends that out to your various subscribers. So what are the pieces that make up the replication model? Well, the core piece is the article. Think newspaper, folks. Think magazines. Just like a magazine is made up of multiple articles, the same thing is true when you're dealing with replication. Your smallest unit of data is referred to as an article. Now, an article can be a lot of different things, and we'll get into that in the upcoming slide. But for now, that's what we're sending to our subscribers, an article. But do you normally subscribe to a single article in the newspaper, or do you subscribe to the entire newspaper, which is made up of multiple articles? And the multiple articles together are what we call a publication. Same thing here. We're going to group our articles together into what are known as publications, and then subscribers get a subscription to a particular publication. So my Western, my Central, and my Eastern can then subscribe to one or more publications. So I'll take a year's subscription to the Times, please. So what's an article again? Data and objects that'll be shared or replicated to the various subscribers around your network. And a publication is simply a group of articles, like a newspaper or a magazine is a group of news articles. And then the subscription is the plan for who gets what publication and when, right? Do you get the Monday through Friday paper? Do you get Monday through Saturday? Do you get Sunday, Saturday only? And is it delivered to your house, or do you go get it? Which is another key concept, because with replication, we have what's known as both push and pull replication, where the publisher pushes, it determines when you get the new data, versus the subscriber pulls, the subscriber determines when it gets the new data. Once again, what goes into an article? Almost anything. Your tables, the data in your tables, any views created in your database, the jobs that you've saved that run automatically can be replicated, stored procedures, any object that you've defined in your database can be a piece or component of an article. Now, looking at the players, who are the agents, so to speak, that make this thing all happen? Well, the driver of the whole thing is the SQL Server agent. I'll call it the boss, because it is always, really, in SQL Server, the one driving any repetitive automated process. So this agent is not specific to replication, by the way. This is simply an agent available in SQL Server for automating any process, including replication. Then there's the snapshot agent. Snapshots, once again, are foundational for any type of replication because it's a starting point for all types of replication. So it's used in transactional versus merge, as well as, of course, snapshot replication. There is a log reader agent. Log reader agents are used in your transactional replication. It's basically reading the publisher's log files and sending the transactions. There's the distribution agent. It's kind of like your dispatcher. It's determining who gets what when, kind of passing out the information. Part of the goal of the distribution agent is to offload that task from your publisher, which in some cases will also be your production machine. And then there's a merge agent. If you're dealing with merging data coming from both the publisher and the subscriber, there is an agent responsible for each one of those. And now a key thing to remember with each agent, they all have their own user accounts, or I'll call them system accounts. Each agent has specific things it's responsible for accomplishing. As a result, each one has needs for access to various resources. So, as is always the case in SQL Server, or even in Windows for that matter, we create system accounts or user accounts, whatever you want to call them in this case, that are specific for each agent, giving that agent the rights and/or permissions or the access that it needs to accomplish its task. A general rule when you're working with SQL Server as well as Windows and maybe even any OS environment, you want to give the least amount of access, the least amount of privilege that is necessary to complete a task for security reasons. But we've talked enough. Let's jump over and actually start creating some of these accounts. So welcome to my world of SQL Server here. I've got three machines, three computers, virtual computers that is, but same difference, that we're going to be using for the process. I have one that I'm going to leave the background paper to this wonderful shade of green so we can hopefully keep track of where we're at. This will be my domain controller. I've got a second box that will be my publisher, and I'm going to change this background so we can make it real obvious. You know, you can't miss it if it's a bright yellow, so we'll go with that, right? That'll be my publisher, and then I've got my subscriber over here in this happy shade of blue. Now, I want these to ultimately be in a domain, and I'll let you know a secret. I'm doing everything in virtual machines, so I'm constantly refreshing these computers. And when I do that, they actually tend to lose their connection to the domain. So I'm going to pop them out and back into the domain. So right-clicking on Computer, go to Properties. I'm going to do that for both my subscriber and my publisher. They're currently in Mel's domain, but once again, every time I do a refresh, it kind of messes with those. So let's fix that before we get started. I'm going to go to Change to a work group. Give it a little time. There we go. So it wants to do a reboot. Let's go ahead and let it do that. And let's switch over to the publisher and do the same thing. Start, right click, my computer, properties, change settings, change, pull you out as well. And then we're going to put it right back. So that's taking it out. Reboot this one. Click close, restart now. And while we're waiting for those to reboot, let's go ahead and start doing some configuration that we need to make this whole thing fly over on my domain controller. So I'll switch over there. So here over on my green domain controller, we've been using the administrator account for a lot of this stuff so far. That's really a bad idea. We were just avoiding the security stuff as much as possible so we could focus on other issues. But we're getting into replication, we're getting into a lot of different agent accounts, and we should pay a little more attention to that. So the first thing I want to do is create an account that I'm going to use for administering my replication that's separate from my administrator account. So going to Start, Administrative Tools, go to Users and Computers. Right click on Users, go to New User, and I'm going to create the MDM, Mel Data Master. Let's put it in the first name field is good enough. He doesn't have a last name. It's just kind of like Madonna, one name only. And turn off user must change. Don't need this password to ever expire. Now typically for any account that's being used by an individual, you do want it to expire, but we'll set this one to does not need to expire for this demo. Give it a password that complies with Windows standards. Click Next, click Finish, and we've got MDM in place. Now, we typically don't want to allocate rights, permissions, etc. to a user. We want to allocate that to a group and then put the user in a group. So let's create a group. We're going to create a SQL admin group. So going to New Group, now I'll call it SQL admin. Leave the defaults of global and it's a security group. Click OK. And then we need to pile everybody inside of everybody. Double clicking on SQL Admin, I want to add MDM to that group. So double click there. Go to Members. Simply add. Just type this one in. It's sure enough, MDM. Check names so you can find it and put in the fully qualified name. Click OK. He's good to go. And then we want to add SQL Admin to my domain admins, because MDM is going to need to do all kinds of stuff. So Members, add SQL Admin. Check names again. Checked out. Click OK. So that's done. You can pull. So let's go check on our rebooted SQL Server boxes and see if we can't pull them back into the domain. I'm going to go to my publisher first, and it's waiting for me to log it back in, so let's do that. And I'll go ahead and start the process on my subscriber as well. And all I'm doing is adding these back into my domain. They were in the domain. I had to pull them out and put them back in because I did a refresh, and sometimes they don't communicate very well if I do that. So now simply saying Start, right click, My Computer or Computer, Properties, Change Settings, do a change, put it back into a domain. So if you're not in a domain, this is how you can join one. Whatever domain you have available to you, if you're creating your own, you need to do that. We have a great a great Windows 2008 class can walk you through all of that. I click OK. It prompts me for a user account that has rights to do this. Using my administrator account and the password for my admin account. And my subscriber is in and it wants to reboot again. So we'll let it go ahead and do its reboot while we move over to the publisher and do the same. Here I'm on my very obviously yellow publisher. Right click, go to Properties again, change settings, change to a domain, joining back into Mel's place here. .local. This is not case sensitive, it just looks nice. Click OK. Once again, prompts for the administrator user account and password. Chugs along for a few seconds and my server fails because I probably typed the password incorrectly. So let's try it again. Click OK. We're in. Click OK. OK again, close it, wants to reboot, let it do its thing. And now, while that reboot happens, let's go ahead and start creating our agent accounts, the user accounts we're going to use for our various replication agents. So moving back over to our domain controller, my users folder is still available. Just right click again, go New, User, and we're going to create 4 accounts, starting with REPL_snapshot. We're creating our snapshots. Next, give it a password that Windows likes. These you definitely want to set to password never expires. You don't want your agent account passwords expiring on you because you won't catch it typically. Next, finish. 3 more to go. New, user. I'm going to create a REPL log reader. That log reader agent. Next, finish. REPL distribution. New, user, REPL_distribution. Make sure I typed it right. Looks good. Even if I typed it wrong, I'd be fine so long as I'm consistent. That's the real biggie. So make sure whatever you put there, you're consistent. One more, I'm going with REPL merge. Now, just FYI, we're not going to do merge replication in this video, but just to kind of put it all together in one package, I'm going to go ahead and create the REPL merge account. So that way, if you do it this way, you know you have all of them you need. Next, give them a password. Click next, click finish. My accounts are all created, all my domain accounts. So I've done just about everything that needs to happen on my domain controller. So I should have some SQL Server boxes available to me. So let's move over there and see what I have. So I'm on my publisher, and I'm going to go ahead and log in using my administrator account because I need to make some changes over here. One of the first things I'm going to do is deal with my firewall. Windows 2008, when I install it, by default it puts the firewall in place, and SQL doesn't like that. It can't communicate. Remember, we're going to be sending files from one computer to another over my virtual network, and even in virtual network land, the firewall will stop that. The firewall will stop that. So I need to fix that problem first. How do I do that? Go to Start, Network, right-click, go to Properties, and in the lower left-hand corner, when it comes up, it should say Firewall. Windows Firewall here. Click there, go to Change Settings, and my firewall is enabled, which is good, but I need to add some exceptions. There's nothing in here about letting SQL Server through. So I need to add a port specifically for SQL Server. Its default port is simply 1433. Click OK. So there is now a very small hole in my firewall. It's only an analogy for letting SQL Server through on this side. I need to do the same thing on my subscriber. Same deal. Change the firewall. Start. Right click on Network, go to Properties. In the lower left hand corner, I should see Windows Firewall. Select Windows Firewall. Change Settings. Exceptions. Same song and dance, no change. Now you could call this anything you want to. You could call it Joe if that's what you want, but so you can understand what you did later, give it a descriptive name. Click OK. OK again. So the firewall is out of the way. After configuring my firewall, one other thing I want to do from the actual subscriber is give MDM access to the server. Because remember, the Windows accounts don't have any access to the server until we create a login within the server. So I'll go to Start, SQL Server Management Studio. Go ahead and log in using my administrator account that I'm currently using. Go to Security, go to Logins, right click, New Login. And I could give access directly to MDM, but I don't have to. I put MDM in a group. Remember the SQL admin group? We're going to go that route because once again it's easier to then include other users by simply adding them to that group in my domain controller, and that gets them SQL admin rights. So it makes it a little easier to manage things. For server roles, I want to make my SQL admin a system admin. Don't need to map it to any databases at this point. Click OK. And if I expand logins, my SQL admin is now a login and a sysadmin on my subscriber. So I'll close that down, and we want to do the same thing back on the publisher. Let's switch over there. Same song and dance again. Start, SQL Server Management Studio, connect, security, right click on logins, new login. In Mel's domain, make him assist admin again, click OK. And if I typed it all correctly, we should be able to log off, log back in as MDM, and have access to both servers to finish the process. So let's try it. I'm just going to switch users for now. Makes it easier to come back to admin just in case I forgot anything. Control-Alt-Delete. Other user this time. MDM. And this is the first time I'm using this account on this computer, so it'll take a little longer to set it up. So I'm in on my publisher as MDM. Now, a couple of things we got to change. First of all, the world should have been left-handed, so we got to change this because for some reason or other it didn't work out that way. There, back in my comfort zone. Second, you only get this the first time you log in with a new account. We don't need to see it anymore. Third, our little visual clues to help us keep track of what server we're on. So staying consistent, we're going to change this desktop to that wonderful shade of yellow again. And now let's test to make sure we can actually communicate through the firewall to the other server. Going to All Programs, I'm going to bring up SQL Server Management Studio again. I'm going to log in to both instances of SQL Server, the one on the publisher and the one on the subscriber. Now, as this is my first time logging in using this account, it's going to take a little longer. First time in, I get the wonderful SQL Server commercial. We can go ahead and turn that off. Just right click and go OK. But it's prompting me to log into my local server. That's just the name of the box I'm currently on. The username, you can't change it, of MDM. Looks good. Click Connect. And looks like I'm in, so I managed to set up this account correctly when I was logged in as administrator. But now let's test going over to the other side. Connect again. Database Engine. Win08-SQL08 is the name of my other server. Click Connect again. And I'm in on both sides. Way cool. So from my publisher, I'm now configuring both servers, the one locally in Chicago and the one, say, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Too bad I can't get there as easily as I can get there to configure it, but maybe one day. So the firewall's done. The MDM account is set up. Our user accounts have not been added to these databases. So we want to add our user accounts for our replication agents to both databases. I'll start with the publisher. Going to security and going to logins, I'm going to add those to this server. Now, one other thing to keep in mind. When I installed my second server, I only installed the stuff I needed at the time. I wasn't using replication. So I didn't install replication. And that's usually a good idea. Unless you know up front you're going to use it, and I wasn't planning to when I first created this instance of this server, so I didn't install it. I'm going to go ahead and do that before I add the user accounts, and here's why. Those user accounts get associated with the databases that they will have access to. Well, replication actually creates a new system database, the distribution database. Well, it's not there yet because I haven't installed replication on this server. So we've tested our communication. We know that works. We're good to go there. So I'm going to close that out. Go to Start, All Programs, SQL Configuration Tools, and there's the SQL Installation Center. Go there. Yes, I want to continue. You should remember this from the installation video if you saw it. Go to Install, and the very first one on the list on the installation page is to add new features or a new instance. Where is the CD? My CD is in my D drive. You'll want to point to wherever you have yours. If it's on a network location, point there. If it's in your CD-ROM drive, point there. Click OK. My initial setup page, click OK again. Click on my install. It does a check before it does the install. The only potential issue is that it notices the firewall is active, which we're perfectly aware of that, and we've taken care of that issue, so we're good to go. We've even tested it to make sure we can get through the firewall. So click Next. Now, do I want to perform a new installation of SQL Server? No. I want to add features to my existing instance. So select the second option, click Next. And the very first checkbox available on the list is SQL Server Replication. Click that. Go Next. Database space, I'm looking good. Click Next. Do I want to send error reports to anybody? Not today. Click Next. No problems. Next again. Get a final checklist. Do you like what you see? If not, you can go back. It saves all this in a configuration file. If you've seen the install video, you've seen all this before. Click Install, and then wait while we watch the water level rise. So I'm going to fade out and jump back in as soon as this is done. Looks like we have success. Click Next. Little summary page telling me what happened, where it saved any log files, release notes that I can read for more information. Go ahead and click Close, and I can close down the installation center, and Replication is installed. So now let's go ahead and actually activate Replication. So I'm pushing back creating the user account simply because the user accounts need to be given access to databases and to folders that don't exist yet. So we're going to do this part first. SQL Server Management Studio. Notice it's defaulting to the last server I logged into. That's not what I want. I want my local server, so if I hit the drop down, it's likely to be in the list. If not, you can just type it in. Hopefully the name you picked is a lot easier than the one I came up with. But click Connect. And on my local server, I want to right-click on the Replication folder. Go to Configure Distribution. And here's where it walks me through creating the database as well as creating the folder where the replicated data will be housed. So my wizard starts, click Next. I'm going to let my publisher act as its own distributor. If I was not going to do that, you would pick the second option and add the names of the server or servers that would act as your distributor. But I only have a couple of servers to work with, so I'll stick with 2-on-1 for now. Next, SQL Server Agent Start. It says here, yes, configure the SQL Server Agent service to start automatically. That would be nice. However, my experience has been you need to still go and start that service manually. So I'm going to step out of this and do that now. That's usually my reminder to do that. So I'll go Start, go Administrative Tools, go to Services. Yes, continue. Scrolling down to SQL Server Agent, notice it's by default set to manual and it's not started. If I double click, I can change it to automatic and start it. So now if I reboot, it'll automatically start itself. While I'm waiting for that to finish, I can go on and click Next. There's the REPL folder. Pay attention to where it puts it because we want to go there, share out that folder, and make sure that all of the accounts we created have rights to access that folder. All of our domain accounts. So it's simply C program files, the installation folder for SQL Server, the SQL Server folder. There'll only be one folder under that, MS SQL, and then we want to grab REPL data. But I'll click Next for now. Distribution database. Here's the name of the database that will be used for my distributions. Right below that, I have the folders where the database files will be stored. You want to leave those as local to the distributor, and they should begin with a local drive letter as it says here at the bottom. So I'll leave those just as they are. Click Next. I could have other publishers access this distributor. We're not doing that because our publisher and our distributor are all one and the same. So I'll click Next again. Configure distribution at the end of the wizard. You better believe it. Click Next again. Here's my final checklist. Before I click Finish, let me go check my services, make sure that's done. Looks like it completed okay and my service is running. Now mine still says manual, which is interesting. Maybe I didn't hit OK. There we go. So now it's set to automatic, so I know it'll start again. So that's good. Click Finish. And success. Now if I go to my databases folder, under System Databases, I have my new distribution database. So we're looking good. So now we're finally to the point where we can actually add those user accounts. Those user accounts need to have access to the distribution database as well as to my Veronica's database, which, by the way, in this instance of SQL, I don't have it here yet. So I actually want to recreate my Veronica's database. And I like to do that at the start of every module just to make sure I have a clean copy. So if you go to your course files folder and go to video or chapter number 11, we have a script you can run that'll recreate your Veronica's database. So let's grab that. Go to File, Open File, go to my C drive, and I've got a course files folder, and we're in video number 11. And I'm going to grab the Veronica's DB with schemas. Double click that one. Go ahead and hit execute, and that'll recreate the Veronica database. Let me maximize that so we can see the messages. The only error message we should get will be cannot drop the database because it does not exist. But other than that, all my rows get created. So my database is there, my replication folder is there. I can start creating those accounts and start pointing them to the resources they should have access to. So let's do that. I'll close this down. Let's go to my security folder. Right click on Logins, New Login, REPL_snapshot. Now you can type this or you can point and click, and we'll do some of both so you can see both. But that's my domain name followed by the user account name. No server roles to worry about on this one, but he needs to have access to distribution and be an owner. He needs to have access to Veronica's and be an owner. Click OK. New logon, and let's do this one a little different. You could just type them for the shortcut, or I could pull them from the list automatically to avoid typing mistakes. So if I go to logins, entire directory, Mel's domain, click OK. So now clicking on advanced, find now, scrolling down, grab log reader, click OK. Same thing for user mapping, distribution, make him DB owner there, and then for Veronica's, same thing for my log reader. So we've covered snapshot, log reader. Let's do REPL distribution. New login. I'll just type these for the short way. Go to user mapping, distribution, definitely an owner. Veronica's, map it there and make it an owner there as well. Click OK. One more to go. My REPL merge. User mappings, put it on distribution and Veronica's. This one does not need to be an owner, however. So just putting it into those databases as an account is sufficient. Click OK. So I've taken care of most of what needs to happen at the publisher. One other key thing, the replication folder. I need to make sure the SQL Server replication agents have access to that folder. So let's go do that. I'm going to close down the Management Studio. We can come back to that when we need it later. Go Start, My Computer, C, Program Files, SQL Server. Remember, we're navigating to the same location that the replication setup said it would put the REPL folder. MSSQL 10, MSSQL, and there's my REPL data folder. If I right click on that, go to Properties, go to Sharing and Advanced Sharing, click Continue, and there's a checkbox. Share this folder. Yep, want to do that. Go to Permissions, and we want to add my accounts. I'm looking at the domain. That's a good thing. Go to Advanced, Find Now, slide this up a bit, and we want all 4 replication accounts. Snapshot, holding down my Control key, I can grab the other 3. Click OK. OK a second time. REPL Snapshot needs full control. The others defaulted to read only, and that's exactly what they need. Click OK. OK again. Now going to Security and do basically the similar. Continue. Add the same 4 accounts, making sure I'm looking at the domain, or you won't see them there. Advanced, Find Now, Snapshot, Merge, Log Reader, and Distribution. Click OK. OK again. It's again Snapshot, needs full control. All the others simply get read by default. That's perfect. Click OK again. So I've done everything I need to do with the user accounts on the publisher. So our user accounts and their access to the databases and to the replication folder is all set. So let's mosey back on over to the slides and talk a little bit about what's next. So we've done everything we need to do prior to creating a publication. We've set up both servers. I've made sure they were in the domain. I've created the user accounts. I've created the replication folder, the distribution database. We've given the user accounts access to the replication folder and to the distribution database. So let's move back over to our server and go ahead and create our publication. Now back on my publisher, we want to create a publication. I'm going to go to my Start menu, SQL Server Management Studio, go ahead and log in to my local server using my MDM account. I'm running under MDM. Expand the replication folder, and there's a local publications folder. Right click there, and the very first thing on the list is New Publication. We'll select that. New Publication Wizard, click Next. It gives me a list of databases that are available. I only have one on this server, so it's already selected. My types of replication, we talked about those, snapshots, transactional, and merge. There's actually 2 different variations of transactional here. We want a basic transactional publication. Click Next. Here it retrieves a list of objects on the server that I can use for publication. I'm going to expand that, and I can see all of my tables that I've created. Now in this database, that's all I've done is create tables and put data in them. I haven't created any stored procedures. I haven't created any views. Notice some of them have not symbols in front of them. If I select one of those, the message actually tells me what's going on. I didn't create a primary key column on some of those tables. So those tables cannot be used in replication. So I can use the customer table, I can use the flowers table, so I'll go ahead and use both of those. And I'll click Next. On this screen, I'm determining if I want to send everything from that table or filter the rows. We're going to add a filter. So clicking Add brings me to a screen with a partially completed SQL statement. I can tell it which table I want to work with. I'm going to go with the customer table, and then what columns I want to include. And I'm going to include the state column. And since this is for our eastern region, I'm going to say I only want stuff from eastern states. So here's my geography test for you. What are the codes for all the states east of Illinois? I'm not going to go with all of those. We'll go at Virginia, Florida, maybe throw in there Pennsylvania, and why not put in New York? It's usually a good idea to test the SQL out just to make sure that you actually got your SQL syntax correct. If you do that, you'll want to substitute an asterisk for this portion of the SQL, and then just try running that in your new query window. Make sure you get back the records that you want to see. Alright? So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. See all the right commas and single quotes in place. Click OK. It parses my filter down at the bottom. Looks good. Click Next. Do I want to create my snapshot immediately? Yes, I do. I could also schedule the snapshot agent to create periodic snapshots by using this here and then changing the interval from the default to whatever I need. But we don't need any regular snapshots at this point. We're going to do everything transactional after the initial snapshot. So I'll click Next. Agent security. I can have one account used for all my agents. In our case, we created separate accounts for each agent. So I don't want to use the snapshot agent for my log reader. So I'll clear that checkbox and add that information for each one. Here you actually have to type in the account and the domain. You don't have an option to point and click. Here's where it's important to be consistent with what you entered before. Just covering some of the other options on the screen, it says here run under the SQL Server agent service account. It also says not recommended, and that's not what we're doing. We are actually using accounts specifically created for these agents. But you could have all of this run using the same account as your SQL Server agent. It'll run by using impersonation when it comes in under that account. I could also have it run using a SQL Server login. I could create a login for that. But impersonation is where we're going to go. Click OK. Do the same thing for log reader. Once again, it's very important to get this correct because none of your agents will be able to access any of the resources if it's not. So double check that. If it's right, click OK. Give it a next. Do I want to create the publication? Yes, I do. Do I want to generate a script file with steps to create the publication? I could do that as well and then rerun this using the scripts. Don't need those for what we're doing today, but it's there. Click Next again. Need to give my publication a name. And since this is for our Eastern region, I'll simply call it Eastern. Click Finish and let it create the publication. Looks like we succeeded. So I can close this. And let's look and see what we have under our local publications folder. If I expand that, there's my Eastern publication based off of the Veronica's database. If I right-click on that publication, there's an option to view the snapshot agent status. Doing that, it lets me know what's happened with that publication. Looks like it generated the publication just fine, so I'm good to go there. So the publication is done. So let's go back to our slides and see what's next. So we've set up everything we need to set up for our servers as far as user accounts, permissions, firewalls. We've actually created our publication. Now we just need to subscribe to it. Once again, what's the subscription? A request for a copy of the publication. We also tell it what we're grabbing, which publication, when, where, how often. And as I said before, there's two flavors. There's push, the publisher sends the information, and there's pull, where the subscriber determines when we get fresh copies of data. So let's go ahead and create a subscription. Back at my publisher, I'm still inside my SQL Server Management Studio, and as we saw before, we've created our publication. One other thing we need to do is make sure our distributor account has access to that distribution, to that publication rather. If I right-click on the publication, there's a properties option at the end. Going to publication access list, here's a list of who has access to this publication. Notice my distributor, who's distributing the publication, isn't on this list yet. I do need to add that. So I'll click Add. There it is at the top of this list. Click OK. And now it's added to the bottom here. So we're good to go. Click OK. And now we can subscribe. So still on the publisher, since we're doing push, the first thing I want to do is go to my publication, my Eastern publication, and right-click. The very top of this list is the new subscription option. Selecting that, I get the new subscription wizard. Click Next. There's a list of all the publications available. We only have one. Clicking Next selects that one. We are doing push versus pull subscriptions, so that default is fine. Click Next. Here's where I get to tell it who and where are my subscribers. This is the server I'm using for my publisher and my distributor. So going to the Add Subscriber button, very first option here is Add SQL Server Subscriber versus a non-SQL Server subscriber. So you can actually publish information out to non-SQL Server database engines. Here I need to log into the actual subscriber. So I want to change this to the name of that computer. In my case, it's Win08-SQL08. Still using my MDM account, which was set up on the other server, so I should be good to go there. Click Connect. I've added it. Now, what database will receive this information on the subscriber? There is no database there yet. So I need to create one. Selecting New Database takes me right into the New Database interface. So I'm actually creating a new database on the other server. I'll simply call it Eastern. Click OK. Keep all the defaults. Now you typically want to adjust that to whatever your actual database needs are going to be, but I just stuck with the defaults for now. Click Next. Here I have to specify security information for the subscriptions. Who has access to what is always part of the configuration process. And in this case, our REPL distribution account needs to have access to that new database we just created. So hitting the ellipse, here I want to enter my distribution account, which is once again in my domain of Mel's domain. And it's the REPL_distribution account. Give it the same password, unless you changed it. Click OK. Click Next. I'm going to let it run continuously. I'm going with defaults on out. When do I want it to run? Immediately. Yes, I wanted to create the subscriptions. Here's a nice summary. Go ahead and click Finish. My subscription has been created. Go ahead and click Close. One last security thing I need to do. We never took care of adding the REPL distribution database to the subscriber. Remember, it's the REPL distribution account that is responsible for writing this information to the subscriber database. Now, we couldn't have done it too much earlier because the subscriber database, it didn't exist. We just created it just now. We called it Eastern, right? So let's log into the subscriber, and I can do that from right here on my publisher. Connect, Database Engine, Subscriber, click Connect. If I expand the databases folder, there's my new Eastern database. So it looks like we're doing good. Expand security, go to Logins. my distribution account has not been added. So if I right click on logins, go to new login, I'm going to add my REPL_distribution account. For user mappings, you got it. Eastern, and he's an owner, so he can do anything he wants to that Eastern database. Going back to my general one more time, double check. We did spell that correctly. Click OK again. So it validated it. We're good to go. Closing all of this down. We have successfully set up replication. Now, how do we know that? Let's look, and we can look in two places. We can look from here on the publisher, once again expanding my subscriber, expanding databases, expanding Eastern, and expanding tables. There's my two tables. If I right click on customers, I can say pull back the top 1,000 rows. It'll generate some quick SQL for me. Expanding this, I can see I've got things from Virginia, Florida, and New York, Pennsylvania. So it looks like I have successfully replicated my data from those states out to my Eastern server. So with that, let's move back over to our slides and wrap up our discussion. Let's talk about some best practices. When dealing with replication, it's very important to be very clear before you do any configuration what data needs to be replicated to whom and when. You want to lay that out as clearly as possible before you start. We replicated some fairly simple records out to the Eastern office. All we're sending out is customer information. Chances are we'll probably need to add more to that at some point. Next, you do want to place your subscribers on a separate computer like we just did. You're really defeating a lot of the purpose of replication if you've got everything on one computer. Carefully plan your backup strategy. We've got information not only in one place, but now we've got parts of our information scattered around the network with updates happening regularly. You want to consider that when you're planning your backup strategy. And regularly validate your replicated data. Don't assume that it's replicating the information correctly. You want to do some regular checks to compare what's actually on your subscribers compared to what's on your publishers, and make sure you're seeing the right match for what should be sent. And then what did we cover? We got into some of the benefits of replication. Talked about setting up replication system accounts. We went through the 4 of them. Configured transactional replication. We got off of using our admin account and moved to the MDM account, which is far more recommended. Talked about the various roles that the server can play in replication. There were 3: publisher, distributor, and subscriber. We talked about the 3 types of replication: transactional, merge, and snapshot. And we went through the SQL Server agents that were involved in replication. We had our snapshot agent, our log reader agent, our distribution agent, and our merge agent. You won't necessarily use all of those. So for example, we didn't use merge. We only ended up using snapshot and transactional for this case. And some new terms. Publisher. You may have heard that used outside of SQL context, but in this world, publisher is simply the source of our replicated data. The distributor handles distributing the data. It can be a separate computer or it can be the same computer as the publisher. And the subscriber is the recipient of the replicated data. It can drive the process or it can be a passive recipient. Basically, it's push where it is passive, or pull where the subscriber is actually driving the process, determining when replication occurs. Number 4, we defined article, which is simply data and objects that will be shared or replicated out to the subscribers. Number 5, publication is a group of articles, similar to the idea of a magazine or a newspaper is made up of articles. Same thing. And then number 6, your subscription is simply the plan for who gets what information and when they get it. So what should you know how to do? You should be able to create and configure system replication accounts. We did that. Should be able to configure your replication folder, configure your publisher, create a publication, and then create a subscription. So with that, we've come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.